The African Human Rights Commission has raised serious concerns about reports that foreign nationals are being denied essential medical care. The Commission says that this practice is unethical, unlawful and violates both the South African and international human rights. It also warns against the growing instances of individuals taking the law into their own hands by blocking access to health care for those they seen as, quote, outsiders. The South African Human Rights Commissioner, Sandra Makwashe, is now joining us to unpack this further.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So the Human Rights Commission says it's unlawful and unethical to block undocumented foreigners from accessing public health care. They say it's a violation of human rights. They quote the Constitution and they say that South Africans must do better. But let's slow that down, because the way they interpret the Constitution, it's misleading, it's dishonest, and most importantly, it puts South Africans last. Let's break this down.
Why did the Commission feel that it's important to issue the statement and also clarity around your interpretation of what the Constitution says?
I think the Human Rights Commission saw it important to do so given the rise in people being denied access to healthcare, but also to remind South Africans of the law and reminding them not to take the law into their own hands. But also, as the Human Rights Commission, our mandate is to promote the observance of human rights, but also educate people on where those human rights stem from. So we did so to remind the general public that in terms of Section 27 of our Constitution, everyone within the borders of South Africa has the right to healthcare and access to healthcare.
Yeah. And as you've seen maybe with the statement that has now been issued by Action SA, their argument is that there is an abuse of Section 27 of the Constitution. They go on to say that in May, Action SA submitted a suite of proposed constitutional amendments aimed at overhauling key provisions. What's your understanding around this? Because this also influences how their own followers understand what the Constitution says and what is expected.
What takes place is that when political parties do not actually, or members of the public, do not actually deal with the systematic issues in the general public healthcare system, then we have this issue where we are fighting, or the general public is fighting for limited resources. And these systematic issues speak about the aging infrastructure in healthcare, the high levels of vacancies, of course, and the unavailability of medication when people go and get healthcare services in clinics as well as hospitals. So those are the systematic issues, and the amendment of the Constitution won't address those systematic issues. What will take place is we hope that in terms of the National Health Act, those systematic issues are dealt with, but also we have financial backing to the Department of Health to ensure that everyone who's entitled to healthcare is given healthcare.
Yeah. In light of what you've just said now around the limited resources being available, is there, though, a case to be made that on the basis of those limited resources, and I think there's common cause around that, that perhaps maybe it is too expensive to implement the ideals that are in the Constitution, and therefore we may need to revisit it?
Based on that, it's not about the Constitution. Once you start amending the Constitution, which is founded on the values of dignity, humanity, and the underlying principle of Ubuntu and treating people with those the same way you would want to be treated, that doesn't deal with the systematic issues. Amending the Constitution won't immediately give everyone access to healthcare, everyone else access to adequate education. And that is why the Constitution speaks about the progressive realization of these specific rights. So it won't really deal with the systematic issues, these amendments. It will simply mean that we're amending the Constitution, allowing certain people to have access to certain rights, and therefore, because of the way the South African borders are, allowing those who really need our help, the most vulnerable members of society, to then suffer because of these amendments.
The Commissioner points to Section 27 of the Constitution, which says Everyone has the right to access health care. Now on the surface, that sounds straightforward, but here's what they conveniently leave out. That same section includes a legal clause that says these rights must be realized progressively and within available resources. Let me explain what that means in plain English. Progressive realization means that government is not expected to deliver all rights to all people immediately. Instead, it has to work towards those rights over time, depending on the money, infrastructure, and resources available. It's like building a house. You don't finish it in one day. You lay the foundation, put up the walls, do the roof, step by step, depending on your budget. So when someone says undocumented foreigners have the same immediate rights to healthcare as everyone else, that's simply not true. If the system is already under strain, if the resources are stretched, and if citizens who pay the taxes are already suffering in the long queues, then the government has a constitutional responsibility to prioritize those citizens first. That's what progressive realization was written for. It acknowledges limited resources and demands prioritization. It does not mean opening the floodgates to anyone who crosses the border.
Yeah, but again, Commissioner, isn't there a case to be made when we speak about the suffering of people that amongst those people would be South Africans as well, the same South Africans that would have gone to the poll to go and cast their ballot, that gives legitimacy to the politicians who are currently governing the country. But what they find is that you have longer queues that are at these health facilities because government needs to also provide the service to foreign nationals and the pressure that it applies on the healthcare system as well. So South Africans themselves are being disadvantaged by the Constitution.
South Africans are protected by the Constitution, and that is why we have a constitutional democracy. The difficulty then is hiding behind the Constitution and saying it is the reason why we are in this dire situation, instead of addressing the real systematic issues. And this is why the Commission is reminding South Africans of the importance of our Constitution and the importance of adhering to that Constitution, as well as the legislation that stems from this Constitution.
Now here's where it gets disturbing. The Human Rights Commission keeps saying it's wrong to deny health care to anyone inside the country. But let me ask, why is it never wrong to deny health care to South Africans? Because that's what's happening. People are dying in queues. Clinics are out of meds. Nurses are overworked and underpaid. Yet no one is calling that a human rights crisis. Why are they not speaking up for that? Why don't they speak for the people who built this country, who vote in this country and pay taxes in this country but still come second? What kind of human rights institution cares more about the undocumented than the citizens? The Commissioner tries to shift the blame by saying, don't blame the Constitution. The real issue is systemic failures in healthcare. Look, she's not wrong that the system is broken. We've known that for decades. But when the very structure of the Constitution is being interpreted in a way that prioritizes illegal foreigners over citizens, then yes, we must change it. A beautiful document that works in theory but fails in practice, that's not justice, that's academic theater. And if certain provisions of that same Constitution are being used to defend lawlessness, then they are not above criticism.
Is the Human Rights Commission looking at taking any action against these individuals at all? We know that the Kopanang Africa Against Xenophobia had taken Operation Dudula to court as well. We're just waiting for a verdict with regards to that.
In terms of we have joined in that case. We provided RS submissions, and we're just awaiting the judgment from the court.
All right, but no other action that the South African Human Rights Commission would be taking at this point?
At this point, we will be investigating, we will be receiving individual complaints. However, the Commission has always been monitoring the healthcare facilities across South Africa. We have been speaking to the respective MECs regarding the high levels of vacancy, aging infrastructure, as well as how do they have an action plan to remedy those issues.
Now, what's worse is that the Human Rights Commission doesn't even offer any solution. They just warn us not to take the law into our own hands. But here's the reality. We're not taking the law into our own hands. We are holding the government accountable for abandoning the law. There are laws against illegal immigration. There are laws about registering with Home Affairs. There are even laws that regulate who can receive non-emergency public services. The problem is, those laws are not being enforced. So when the citizens step in to say, stop this abuse of the system, they're not being criminals. They're being patriots trying to stop a national collapse. Here's my message to the Human Rights Commission. If you want to protect human dignity, start by protecting South African dignity. Start by defending the rights of the people who built this country. The mothers and fathers, the children, the unemployed, the nurses, the taxpayers who have waited long enough for change. Instead of telling the citizens not to take the law into their own hands, you should be talking to Home Affairs, health MECs, and law enforcement who continue to look the other way. This country is on the edge, and if you don't want citizens standing at clinic gates, then do your job before we have to. Watch the video on your left to see a Nigerian woman expose how foreigners abuse public hospitals. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. Until next time.